What you love today could be what you hate tomorrow. Let's dissect this. So, a lot of us have beliefs that we hold quite firmly, myself included. And I can give you guys so many examples of certain beliefs that I had a year ago, 5 years ago, a decade ago, that if you asked me what my views are on that today, it would be the exact opposite. So this video is meant to kind of shed light on this phenomenon that we are humans and humans have fickle feelings. So the beliefs that we have today are not fixed, they're not set in stone. So that means that maybe you can find a video on my channel from a few years ago and tell me, you said this in 2019, but today you're saying this, and those are completely opposites. And my response would be, yeah, because I'm growing, because I'm changing, because I'm human. So I'm going to give you guys a few examples of certain beliefs that I have had that have completely shifted. And I want to use this video as teaching material so that you can look within and take assessment of what beliefs you have today, what thoughts do you have today that could potentially and very likely change in the future. So a few years ago, I strictly read nonfiction books, meaning I was only reading self-development books, biographies, things that were factual, right? And at the time, I thought that reading a novel was a little bit of a waste of time, you know? Like, why would I read a novel? I could just watch a movie or, watch something that isn't real and get the same effect. At that time, I didn't see the value in reading a novel because I had the perception that I was getting more value, more out of reading a nonfiction book. Okay, so at that time, I was heavily interested in psychology and finance, in a lot of these sorts of topics. And so the books that I was gravitating towards were all about different studies being done, about, different trends that they're noticing, or, things that actually had a factual basis. And I'm not sure how, but one day I decided to read a novel. And it's not like I had never read a novel before. I used to love reading novels back when I was a teenager and even younger than that. But somewhere along the way, I lost that desire. I lost that feeling of reading a novel and getting fulfillment out of it. So a few years ago, I read a novel and I just had this epiphany. I sat in it and I thought, I have been wrong. Okay, this whole idea that I can only get value out of a nonfiction book is completely false. And I actually found myself getting so much value out of novels, the same as I was getting out of nonfiction books, if not more. And it was because I was able to read this story and really dissect the themes that the author was painting. I was able to easily identify characters and how they were different and how they were developing along the story. I was able to get so much out of the plot, out of the conflict, out of the climax, out of all of these things, even though the story was not factual. It was fiction. So since then, I started enjoying novels so much. And in present day, I read about 80% novels, 20% nonfiction. So exactly opposite from what I used to be doing, right? So that is just one example, but there are so many different examples in my life where I have completely changed views on something. Another thing that I completely changed my view on was alcohol consumption. A few years ago, I would look at people who were sober and who were walking the straight path, and I would think, that must be awfully boring. I used to have thoughts that these people were not as fun, they weren't as exciting. My husband and I used to joke, like, we better not have a double date with that couple because, they're sober and they're not that fun to be around. And lo and behold, now I'm at this place where I value sobriety. And I'm not saying that I don't drink at all. I do drink every now and then. I have a whole video where I talk about my relationship with alcohol and how it's shifted. I'll link that up above. But now I truly actually value people who choose sobriety, who choose not to engage in alcohol consumption. And it's literally the exact opposite of what I used to think. Now I look at people who drink every time they go out and I think they must not be fun when they're sober. Like, they must literally need alcohol in order to bring out fun and excitement in their lives. That probably means that they're not that cool to begin with. And so now I'm having a completely different idea about alcohol and sobriety. And now I'm actually admiring those who are able to live an alcohol-free life and who are able to indulge in other habits like hiking, like traveling, like going out into nature and doing things that don't involve substances. And so once again, I had a complete shift of mentality. I've had a complete change of thought about alcohol. So many of us think that we know what our perfect partner is like, but we don't. And even if we did, that view of what perfection is would change a year from now. So this is what I always tell my clients. You might think that you need to marry someone who shares your same ethnicity. You might think that you need to marry someone who has a college degree. You might think that you need to meet someone who is an entrepreneur. But you don't realize that that same thing that you love and admire and cherish today might be the same thing that you despise later on. And this is so crucial. This is why we need to hold our beliefs loosely. And this is why we shouldn't get so attached to a certain belief system or to a certain mentality, because this can really keep us in a rigid box and it can really hinder us from growing and reaching our potential. I give myself the freedom to change my mind, and I hope that you give yourself that same freedom, because we should be changing and evolving and having a newfound perspective as time goes on. There's that saying, if I knew then what I know now, I would do XYZ differently. And vision is always 20/20 in hindsight. It's because with each experience that we have, our understanding gets deeper, it gets enriched, and we're able to see something from a nuanced point of view, from a more mature point of view. And then we're able to make new decisions that probably didn't align with what our old self thought. So one of the things that I thought that I wanted in a life partner was another entrepreneur. I thought that I wanted to marry someone who was also starting a business, who was also growing a business. But guess what? You know who God brought me? He brought me an amazing man who is not an entrepreneur, who doesn't have a business, who has no desire to have a business. And now that I know what I know now, I'm so grateful that I let that desire dissipate and that instead I embraced what was in front of me. Because if I had rejected my husband because he wasn't an entrepreneur, I would probably be with someone now who is so busy, who's so dedicated to their business that we wouldn't really have time to connect. And guess what? We wouldn't have much variety in our life either. My husband and I can look at each other and offer a completely different perspective because I look at it with an entrepreneur lens. He looks at it from a corporate lens. And so we both bring something to the table that is unique, and it allows us to thrive as a couple. Had I been with an entrepreneur, we wouldn't have that complexity. We wouldn't have that ability to look at things from a different perspective. And we would both be on this journey that is quite risky, that doesn't have much security. And so when we go out, especially when it comes to dating, and I'm telling this to you ladies especially, because men tend to be a little bit more open when it comes to meeting women. I mean, as long as she's attractive, he's basically game. But for us women, we have this long list that he needs to go to an Ivy League school. He needs to be this ethnicity. He needs to be this age. He needs to have X, Y, and Z. And I am challenging you to think beyond that box. To understand that, yes, these are my desires today, but my desires are fickle and they will likely change next year. So why don't I give this a chance? Why don't I just go on that first date and get to know this person beyond this box that I'm checking off? Another thing that's quite interesting about what we love and what we hate is that a lot of times we don't really know what's best for us, and we really don't know what we truly love. We think that we have this idea in our head, but when we actually get it, we feel differently about it. So let me give you an example. I have always gravitated towards introverts. I've always liked men who were a little bit more reserved, a little bit more quiet, a little bit more shy. And that just created this nice sense of polarity because I'm very talkative, I'm very bubbly, I'm very communicative. And so it kind of created this nice tug and pull where we were both different and bringing out a different flavor from one another. Well, guess what I found was after a few years of being with my husband, I was like, he never wants to go to this event. He doesn't want to go to this party. He doesn't want to do this. And I was starting to be like, I really liked him being an introvert. Was I confused? Do I not like that? Is that something that I wish to change? And I started having this inner dialogue because there were times when I would tell my husband we got invited to this event and he'd be like, I don't really want to go. I'll skip this one. And for a second, I kind of felt triggered. Like, what do you mean? You're my partner. You have to show up. And then I took a step back and realized, wait, Rulla, just because you love your husband being an introvert doesn't mean that you're going to love that trait in all seasons, in all chapters, in every single, stage of your life. There are going to be moments when you're like, oh man, this introvert thing is not working out today. Or there's going to be times when my husband's like, could you go and tell our provider this, because he's shy. And then for a second, I'll feel those feelings come up of being like, why don't you just talk to him? And then I'm like, wait, this is an introverted person. And so just because you like these aspects of an introverted person doesn't mean that you're now neglecting these aspects of being an introverted person. So there are pros and cons to every trait. And my husband can say the same about me. Like when he met me, he loved that I was an extrovert. He loved that I was talkative. But I'm sure that there are moments when he's like, when is this lady going to stop talking? Maybe he's tired. Maybe he just wants to sit on the couch and I'm blabbing away and trying to get deep about a certain discussion and he's just like not in the right mind to have it. We need to realize that just because we love a certain trait doesn't mean that we're not going to face challenges with it. It doesn't mean that there are going to be times where that thing annoys us a little bit, where that thing repels us a little bit. So with anything in life, there are going to be aspects that we love and aspects that we don't love as much. When my husband and I bought this home, that was the biggest blessing in my life. But guess what? Cleaning a 4,000 square foot home isn't easy. So along with the thing that I love, come some things that aren't that easy. Come some things that aren't that great. But that's how life works. Just because we love something, just because we adore something, doesn't mean that there are certain aspects of it that we still have to work through, that we still need to tackle. In addition to that, just because you completely love something today or think you love something and are attached to that idea and hold that belief so firmly, it doesn't mean that you are going to feel that same way in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. And this is why sometimes we grow apart. We find new friends. We leave jobs. We pursue new hobbies. This is sometimes why people get divorced. This is why there are times when we are out of contact with someone and then we lose touch and then we reconnect. Life is this ebb and flow, and we really do need to realize that with everything we love, there's going to be some point where we don't feel that way anymore, or that we need to shift our mentality so that we're able to see the beauty in it. And so now that I'm loving novels and reading novels, I don't go around and say that nonfiction books are bad, nonfiction books are boring, nonfiction books aren't as good, because I know that there was a point in my life when nonfiction was all that I read. So although I enjoy novels now, I'm not going around with this belief that they're superior to other books, that they're better than other books, that I'm never going to read another type of book, because I know that my interests and the things that I like and gravitate towards are constantly changing, and that is what it means to be human. So let me know what you guys thought about this video. If you liked it, definitely give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you all very soon. Bye.